Testing, testing. Okay, testing, testing. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Alright, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Right. Alright, can you hear me? Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Oh boy, you have no idea how long I've been fiddling with this fucking setup to try and get this right. Alright, got every got everything set up, just need to wait for a little bit longer and then we'll be able to start. I'm also gonna try and record this, but I'm not too sure how that works on YouTube. I'm not sure if that actually works. It actually. All right. So that's okay. So there's that at least. Audio is in. Of course, next thing is, would it be? Is it possible? Is it possible to record this while doing it, or is that just something that YouTube automatically does? Looking at my channel now, though. From looks of it, it does show my streams. Okay, yeah, this should work. Oh boy. Now, okay, so I got two people on so far. Okay, should I wait a little? All right, chat. Should we wait a little bit longer, or should we just get right into it? It did have a bit of an intro planned. I'm not entirely sure if it's working. I have a bit of an intro plan. Just not sure if it's not sure if I should wait for a little bit later when more people are on, or fix the link. Okay, so we had one for. You know what? Fuck it. Greetings and beyond the new audience. My name is Glarn, and welcome to the first official session of a little project I've been working on for quite a while now. Simply put, I'm a bit of a collector, and by far my most favorite thing to collect are stories, monsters, horrors, the unknown. Especially the stuff from. I believe that there's a lot to be learned of how people think, from what the stories they write and what they're scared of. And I've also been a huge dinosaur nerd. And over the years, I've collected a pretty decent pile of literature involving dinosaurs of various degrees of accuracy, as well as just general monsters. And I thought, fuck it, why not share it with the world? And so here I am, with I am essentially just doing a dramatic readings of some of the things that I found over the years, and hope I'm starting out with some stuff that's public domain, mostly because, hopefully YouTube won't be able to try to sue me if I do something wrong. It's all public domain, which means anyone can use it. And for you creative types out there, it means that every single story I'm about to tell you is entirely free for your use in your own projects. What are they gonna do? Sue you? They fucking can't. They've been dead in the ground. Everyone who wrote these stories has been dead in the ground for a couple decades. In fact, they've been dead for at least 70 years. Our first ever title is the Sauria Monstra, a collection of pulp sci-fi and fantasy, and fantasy featuring, as the title suggests, dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and other fossil saurians, and classic science fiction and fantasy. Now, I'm not. There's not. It's a pretty dense text and not a lot of illustrations, as most of the works of this time usually were. So it's not really. If this is something you want to have in the background as you're listening to something else, you go for it. I hope to eventually be able to do this. I don't know, at least part time. So, I don't know. So the feedback and anything about that would be greatly appreciated. I also, I don't know. It would be nice if being able to make a bit of money off of this. But I know it's a shot in the dark. But a guy can hope. Okay, let's see. Sorry, just checking to see if anyone else might be interested in the channels I posted this on. But given that seemed apparently no response, fuck it, might as well just do it for you, my two beloved viewers. As such, Alice's sign. I'm not very good at doing. Again, remember, this is my first time doing this, and I'm also very stupid on top of that. So don't get your expectations too high. Great, and oh shit, a third person's joined. Our viewer count just increased by 30%. Welcome, new viewer, and welcome to the Sauria Monstra. Actually, before we start, I'm going to let's step out for a minute and get some lights on so I can properly read this. I'm I'm quite literally just doing this on a pile of wires on my desk, so you have to excuse the messiness. Worst comes to worst, and this camera setup doesn't exactly work very well. A lot of those pulp stories are saved in various spots online. So if worst comes to worst, I can always just use that as a basis for my streams. Without further ado, let's get cracking. And you can see you've got a pretty good selection of stuff here. Going back, going for about, let's see, spanning about, over 60 years, including a full-length novel, the one that quite literally wrote the book on the Lost Lands of Dinosaurs, The Lost World, 1912. However, that book is also, well, a full-length novel, and I'm absolutely not capable of reading for that long or keeping people's attention for that long. As such, I like to offer for these ones for you guys to choose from. The Last of the Vampires from 1893, The Lizard, 1898, The Monster of Lake Lametri of 1899, The Slaying of the Plesiosaurus from 1903, 1907's The Pterodactyl, 1908's The Monster of Partridge Creek, the Diplodocus, The Last Haunt of the Dinosaur, both from the same year, The Great Beast of Kafue from 1917, 1920's The Lizard God, 1927's The Beast of the Youngest and the Paradise of the Ice Wilderness, 1928's The Ancient Horror, and 1955's Report on the Status Quo. Tell me, which of these titles stands out to you? Or should I just go from one by one? It should stay there for a bit. All right, that's one vote for Paradise of the Ice World, and seeing as our record high viewership has now dropped down to the usual 2 people, I might as well. Well, it seems like that's the only one that's going to go on. Democracy in action. All right, our pick is Paradise of the Ice World, the Ice Wilderness. And it's fair warning, I have read all these beforehand. Some of these are are very much say a product of their time, which I mean they get real fucking racist. So I'm probably gonna try and modify that as I go, but I'll see how it is. But we'll see how as we go. Just gonna try one more thing. Just sending out a note. I'm starting. Okay, sorry about the silence, chat. Okay, sent out a couple. Sent out a couple more notes, but yes, Paradise of the Ice page 137. That is the The Paradise of the Ice Wilderness by Julius Regas. So, we were half a dozen good friends, enjoying a glass of beer at the village inn, and we just asked the sea captain for a story. He put down his pipe and produced two small cuttings from his pocketbook. He cleared his throat and began. Well, I should like to refute those strange hypotheses and statements which have been produced from many quarters regarding what occurred at the Bay of Chantanga, east of Cape Seljoskin in North Siberia during the winter of 1896 through 97. It happened during the trip along the coast of North Asia, which I then made with the Swedish whaler the White Bear. And the story which I am going to tell you will be the narrative of an eyewitness to a queer occurrence in North Siberia on Christmas Eve in 1896. For those among you who peradventure have not heard anything about the matter, I will read both these cuttings. December 29th, 1896. A curious discovery. On the morning of Christmas Day, a trapper of Russian nationality arrived at the little town of Popagaisk, near the mouth of the Chantanga in Chantanga Bay. Some of the people in town asked him to be believed he had seen, some miles north of this town, fresh tracks of a large animal. His quite sure the animal was a mastodon. And the man was right in his supposition. This means astonishing bit of news. A correspondent adds that heavy snowfall had already blotted out the tracks of the animal. Yeah, it's like talking in the radio voice because it's the 1890s. See? January 9th, 1897. Christmas guest from the primitive ages? A week ago, we published a short article regarding a queer discovery unknown in Siberia. Seems as now the discovery as though the discovery may be confirmed from another source. Many persons certainly be looking for the tracks of the mastodon for that result, but if we dare believe the Eskimo Amsalik, he had been close upon making near acquaintance with a strange animal. He too had been searching for the tracks till dusk began to fall, and with it a fine, thick snow, which made it impossible for him to proceed any further. He was about to turn back, when in the darkness he heard a loud cracking, like that of ice breaking up in spring, he said. Next instant, heavy, clumsy feet resounded against the frozen ground, and a clumsy, gigantic body of unusual shape brushed by him so closely he felt the rush of air. The animal had undoubtedly been frightened by something, perhaps by Amsalik himself. Since his narrative has been made public, so hunters have set out to find the mysterious animal. When these articles were printed, I was frozen in with my ship and crew in the Polar Sea. I have been told that they aroused considerable interest in certain quarters. Various ideas were debated. Everyone had his own version of the matter. Most fantastic comments were published. Nevertheless, the truth seems more fantastic still. On August 1st, I sailed from Hammerfest as captain with my vessel, the old splendid White Bear, which in spring of 1899 collided with an iceberg and sank off Archangel. The plan of the expedition was the usual one, to proceed along the north coast of Europe and Asia as long as possible, hunting for the whales and seals which are getting scarcer year by year. It was no new and untried enterprise. Already in the middle of 1800, an attempt had been made to create a regular whale traffic in those waters. Such an expedition usually stayed away a year, but proceeded in the summer as far as possible. In the winter it lay frozen in by the ice, and returned the following spring with heavily laden vessels. We thus coasted along the shore of Kola and Kanin, south of Koljugao, and up toward Kairuporta, a voyage which was a little longer in reality than in description. We were lucky. In 3 months we were able to discharge a full cargo at the company station on Nova Semlya. Encouraged by our progress, we continued eastwards. At the beginning of the winter we found ourselves at 114 degrees eastern longitude in northern Skilled Sea, after having followed about the same course as the Vega. Here, at the mouth of the Chantanga, we ultimately became lee-bound for the winter and had to prepare for an Arctic winter sojourn. The vast ice desert which surrounded us would have been irritating its monotony if the eye had not found a fixed point in the expanse of white. Hardly 50 yards to our right was a little island, also covered with ice, from which one had a view of the narrow sound that separates the island from the mainland. The island was a mass of rock, in some points unusually high over the water's edge, while the mountain top in its center had a height of, say, 3,000 feet. This island, which has no name on the chart, was christened by the crew Hermit Island. While the ship was being pushed out of the water by the ice, we built ourselves a winter hut on the island. Our new residence was very comfortable. The house was divided into one large and one small room. In the former resided a part of the crew, and in the latter the mate, Trapper Jensen, the controller of the company, a young man named Berg, who was much like on board the steamer, on account of his friendly and pleasant manner, and lastly myself. The rooms were lighted and warmed by a dynamo which we had on board. Under no circumstance is it not surprising that life is likely to be lonely and sad, and it was worse at Christmas time. We felt homesick while we were sitting at a late breakfast on the 24th of December on Hermit Island. Every one of us was taken up with his own thoughts. Even the controller, Berg, showed a gloomy face. We expected no pleasant Christmas. But if we wanted to stimulate interruption, we got it. We had not quite finished our meal when the ship's cook threw open the door and rushed in, followed by a sailor. I asked in astonishment what was the matter, but the man was so bewildered that he could not reply, and the sailor explained instead. "Well, Captain, we have made..." What kind of voice should I do for this? Like Swedish, Russian, or... I think I'm gonna. I think I'm just gonna go full Swedish chef. Fuck it. Well, Captain, we made a discovery. Yes, the whole appearance was one such helpless astonishment that followed the two men without a word. My four comrades accompanied me, of course, and our two guides led us to the foot of a cliff, where the whole of the crew was standing staring at something. Not a little inquisitive, we made our way out to them through the snow. At the side of the perpendicular stone wall was a compact mass of ice that had been gathering through the ages. Its size and color hinted a great age. The secret of which it was hiding would, however, never have been revealed if the cook, who was a very smart fellow, had not made a fire on exactly this spot in order to get some fresh water for the kitchen. When the cook returned for more water, the fire had melted a deep hollow in the ice at the side of the cliff, and when by chance he cast a glance through this ice window, what I saw was sufficient to make him sit down in the snow, dumb with astonishment. A sparkling fire continued its work, and when we arrived the hollow was over 6 feet deep, making a cavity in the ice wall outside of which the fire was burning. There was nothing unusual in all this, but through the clear ice wall, the contours of a big animal could be seen. Embedded in the blue ice, we saw 2 curved tusks, each as long as a fully grown man. "Ahoy!" exclaimed Berg, his jovial mind soon mastering the summit. "More fuel! We're going to melt out the poor thing!" Wood was fetched and the fires crackled and blazed. The flames threw red reflections in among the ice rocks, and the shadows were deep violet and further away blue. Above us the stars were sparkling, and bright northern lights fluttered over half the sky. The intense heat caused the icy water to rush around our feet, but while the undermost layers of wood hissed and sputtered and smoked in the snow water, the uppermost flamed briskly, fed with dry bushes, which in more protected places had carried on a hopeless fight against the Arctic cold. Round the fire all the crew of the White Bear were standing, gazing almost in stupor at the scene below, and seeing at each other. The contours of the big animal emerged more and more. The ice grew thinner and whiter. All at once a little black spot appeared. It grew bigger, and a brown-gray, hairy hide was bared. "What the... is it a mammoth?" asked Berg in his impulsive manner. So it was. My men wished to cut out the animal with their axes, but I forbade it, fearing to injure the body. The ice melted slowly away, and finally the colossus stood free, under an arched roof of dripping ice. The shapeless beast measured about 11 feet in height and 12 feet in length. The trunk was longer than the tallest man among the crew. The second mate, who had always boasted of his knowledge, remarked that such discoveries had been made before in several places in Siberia, and the ice hermetically sealed to preserve the dead body and saved it from decay, as the cold hindered the activity of the decaying organism. The flesh of the animal before us was, therefore, as fresh as if it had lived yesterday and not several thousand years ago. In order to confirm his word, the man inserted his knife in the animal's hide, and behold, some drops of blood squirted out of the cut. At this sight, several of the fellows paled, and I, too, grew more than astonished. This blood that I saw dripping before my eyes had been coursing through the veins of the animal during the primeval ages. The crew, however, had brought more wood, and the red flames from the fire threw a weird shining reflection on the 1,000 or more years' ice wall. This scene of the darkness of the frozen expanses of the polar sea at Christmas time was so like a saga that we hardly should have been astonished that the big animal body had awakened to life and stepped out among us. The hide was steaming and the hairy trunk shook. Berg was polishing his nose loudly. Would the mastodon lift its trunk in thundering answer? In eager curiosity, the ship's mate was running about the animal, fingering it, measuring it, all the while holding a short scientific lecture to us others who were regarding the wonder in silence. But this animal, did not the legs shake under it? Did it not slowly alter its position? What would happen now? Frozen, hungry, but not less interested, we waited breathlessly for the continuation of the adventure. And it came, though it took time. Well, hello, new viewer. That's brought us up to a grand total of 4 people. More than I've ever had in this. Congratulations, number 4, and welcome. When the fire had been fighting the 1,000-year-old ice for some hours, the colossus from antiquity began to stagger, and with a noise which shook the ground, the gigantic animal fell heavily to one side, extinguishing the flames as if he had blown out a candle. But simultaneously something else happened. Just where the colossus had been standing beside the wall of the cliff, we discovered a vault, and within this we saw. Several years had now passed since the event happened, but still I can hardly describe what we heard and saw when the 1,000-year-old ice field revealed its secret to us. During the whole of a long winter we had only seen ice in every conceivable formation. The monotony of the white and solitary ice fields that stretched to the horizon had almost killed us. We had lost all hope of a change. I do not know whether you will understand me, but the mere prospect of such an adventure of such unexpected proportions as thus quite bewildered us. Before our eyes opened a rocky passage, covered with bleached skulls and skeletons, the bones of animals. These were creatures from hoary antiquity, which had guarded the secret. Above us loomed the heavy rock formations of the mountain, in their shadow hiding a world-startling mystery. For already from without we could see that the passage led to the depths of darkened chasms, into a system of passages and caves. "Forward, boys! Follow your leader!" cried Berg, and stormed into the darkness. "Wait, a lantern!" I cried. "No necessary, it's already later here." His answer sounded hollow, as if it had come from a mine. Actually, "Not necessary, it's already later here, Bergen." We stood bewildered, not believing our eyes or ears. Finally 4 others and myself penetrated into the passage. From a distance Berg called to us. The echoes changed each of his words to a rattling volley of musketry. It was a low, irregular vault, half dark for about 1,000 yards ahead and filled by violently scattered rocks, which in some places only gave space enough to creep through. The cleft finally widened into a high-vaulted grotto, which lost itself in twilight in all directions. A silent and sinister place, whose inhabitants had been dumb for generations. Everywhere these bones, eloquent even if dumb evidences of races that perished long ago. The cold, dry air of decay and death filled our nostrils. The place was not uncanny or even sinister. The ground was covered with gorgeously shaped plants, many of which were luminous or strangely colored. There were ferns of a height which seemed enormous to us, Unknown kinds of trees, flowers in subdued tints, mostly pale red, some with white stripes. It was a radiance of pale and clear colors that was delightful. While we were devouring the scenes with our eyes, Berg joined us. Some yards further on, we were stopped by a murmuring sound. A watercourse slowly sawed its way between the stones, and on its margins we found big, bleached human bones. I took one of the grinning skulls in my hand. It stared at me with its empty eye cavities as if it were saying, "Solve my secret if you can." But where did this vegetation come from, this rich verdure in the midst of the ice wilderness? After having followed the watercourse for a while, we found the explanation. It stopped suddenly at the foot of a wall of rock, where a whirlpool was in action. I dipped my hand into the water. It was warm. Subterranean spring, then, and further away, very high up, a faint light was visible. There must be an opening. The mate declared that we were standing on the volcanic crater bottom of what had been a fire-vomiting mountain, extinct long ago. It was a paradise we had discovered, a paradise of twilight and solitude, it's true, but a pleasure garden compared with the cold expanse which outside stretched in all directions. We balanced ourselves on the stones and crossed over the watercourse and walked up the opposite shore, which sloped up from the water. Arrived at the top, we found before us a large expanse, whose borders were lost in the darkness on all sides. Here and there phosphoric fungus growths spread a pale light over the bedrock. I sniffed the air. "Queer," I remarked. "It smells to me as if it smells of steebles, yes," Berg replied with a snort. "And hundreds of 'em," added the mate emphatically. Berg sent up a hallooing. The echo replied with a hollow roar that startled us. "What a mighty echo," remarked Berg, a trifle pale. After it had died away, a sinister silence fell over the cavern. We did not move. "Down there, where the earth is softer," the mate muttered in a perplexed voice. "What?" I exclaimed. He pointed along the shore. "Do you not see the earth is full of footprints?" "By Jove!" exclaimed Berg. "Footprints of the mammoth!" "Or of a still bigger animal," the mate continued. "Some are old and dried up, some were made later, and some were made today!" He spoke the last sentence in such bewilderment that we all drew nearer. All at once it seemed darker and uncannier about us than ever before. Said Berg with a voice which he tried to make steady. "For my part, I am turning back." "Yes, let us go back," I repeated. At the same instant the echo was heard before us again, but we had only spoken in whisperings. Out of the darkness came a roar as strong as the trump of doom, and uttered at short intervals. It was heard again and again, followed by a sound of a sledgehammer regularly being thrown against the earth. My hair seemed to rise on my head as I lifted my arms, for I thought the mountain was going to fall over me. Something panted and stomped among the rocks, something roared and rumbled. Without a sound, the mate held up his hand and pointed. Without a sound, the mate held up his hand and I followed his glance. Great heaven! There, between some gigantic ferns, stood a comrade to the prehistoric animal we just melted out of the ice. But living. And it seemed of quite a different kind. The legs were those of an elephant, the body large and the throat thick and covered with long, straggling red bristles. The head was enormous and finished almost abruptly with a large, broad mouth. The tail, which was furiously whipping the leaves of the giant ferns, was long, resembling that of a lizard. The giant lizard, or whatever I am to call the thing, set up a hissing sound and approached us. There was no mistake about it. Its eyes were staring at us. It looked at us with a greediness which unrolled a perspective of horrible views for our inner sight. For a moment we stared at each other, the animal from antiquity and the men from the Swedish whaler, the White Bear. Then the mate set off at top speed over stock and stone toward the entrance of the passage, followed closely by the rest of us. One of us cried out, but I do not think it was I. We were running for life, and after us came a roll like thunder, where 4 heavy feet stamped against the bottom of the crater. The panting animal voice rose and fell. I sent up a silent prayer to the great someone that we might be permitted to get outside ere those feet. The mate was running like a madman before me, to my left Berg, behind us the others, and lastly the animal. In this order we entered the passage. As it was very narrow, and hardly would permit an animal of such dimensions to pass through it, we felt pretty safe here, but we didn't think of that. We imagined the beast was close on our heels, and on we ran. We used up the last remnant of air in our lungs to reach the entrance. The cold had already begun to close it, and we had hard work to break it open again. Without a snowstorm rage, and it was a white death that confronted us. When we had worked halfway up for the ship, a man with a light of a snowed over lantern met us. The north wind had raised its mighty voice, and the ice was already jamming the white bear. For 2 weeks we worked day and night to save the ship. When we finally succeeded, we had drifted so far out that we dared not risk another attempt to reach the Hermit Island. And the ice wilderness up there hides a sealed-up paradise, but by all top lanterns and yardarms, I am no hurry to penetrate into that hidden region a second time. Pretty solid story. Bit short, but that's how it usually was with these sorts of things. See, and of course the beastie. My general imagery of it is essentially like a short snouted Victorian megalosaurus with a beard, maybe with a beard and some hair. And it seems that we've lost one of our viewers. Oh well. Let's see. All right, and that was the first story we got. And now let's see. Now for my loyal trio. Where shall we venture next? Yeah, what sort? Oh, a fourth viewer joins us. Say your name, new viewer. Welcome to the stream. According to my stream statistics, there's 4 people watching at the moment. Oh, just dipped. It just dipped one little bit ago, 5 minutes ago, but it's back on top. Oh my god. So I'm currently thinking like either slaying the plesiosaurus or the lizard or last of the vampires. Yeah, now it says there's three people. Oh, yeah, now it's back to three. All right, last of the vampires it is. Yeah, first I just have some water. Gotta invest in a sports bottle lid. Do you remember the discovery of the man lizard bones in the cave in the Amazon sometime in the 40s? Perhaps not. But it created a great stir at the time in the scientific world, and in a lazy sort of way, interested men and women of fashion. For a day or two, it was quite the correct thing, I think, for Belgravia to talk of connecting links of the evolution of man from the reptile, or the reasonableness of the ancient myths that spoke of centaurs and mermaids as actual existences. The fact was that a German Jew, an India rubber merchant, wending his way with the usual mob of natives through a cahoot forest along the Marignan, came across upon some bones in the riverbank where he had pitched his camp. Idle curiosity made him try to put them together, when he found to his surprise he had before him the skeleton of a creature with human legs and feet, a dog-like skull, and immense bat-like wings. Being a shrewd man, he saw the possibility of money being made out of such a curiosity. So he put all the bones he could find into a sack, and on the back of a llama they were in due course conveyed to Chachapoyas, and thence to Germany. Unfortunately, his name happened to be the same as that of another German Jew who had just then been trying to hoax the scientific world with some papyrus rolls of a date anterior to the flood, who had been found and milked put to shame. So when his namesake appeared with the bones of a winged man, he was treated with very scant ceremony. However, he sold his India rubber very satisfactorily, and for the bones, he left them with a young medical student of the ancient University of Björnwurst, went back to his cahucho trees, his natives in the banks of the Amazon, and there was an end of them. The young student put his fragments together, and do what he would, he could only make one thing of them: a winged man with a dog's head. There were a few ribs too many, some odds and ends of backbone which were superfluous, but what else could be expected of an anatomy of so extraordinary a creature? From one student to another the facts got about, and at last the professors came to hear of it, and to cut a long story short, the student's skeleton was taken to pieces by the learned heads of the college, and put together again by their own learned hands. But do what they would only make one thing of it: a winged man with a dog's head. The matter now became serious. The professors were at first puzzled, and then got quarrelsome. The result of their squabbling was that pamphlets and counterblasts were published, so all the world got to hear the bitter controversy about the man-lizard of the Amazon. One side declared, of course, that such a creature was an impossibility, that the bones were a remarkably clever hoax. The other side retorted by challenging the skeptics to manufacture a duplicate, and publishing the promise of such large rewards to anyone who would succeed in doing so. The museum was beset for months by competitors, but no one could manufacture another man lizard. The man part was simple enough, provided they could get a human skeleton, but at the angles of the wings were set huge claws, black, polished, and curved, and nothing that ingenuity could suggest would imitate them. And then the genuinists, as those who believed in the monster called themselves, set the imposturists another poser, and they publicly challenged them to say what animal either the head or wings had belonged to, if not to the man lizard. And the answer was never given. So any victory remained with them, but not, alas, alas, the bones of contention. The impostoress, by bribery and burglary, got access to the precious skeleton, and lo, one morning the glory of the museum had disappeared. The head and the man half of it was left, but the head and wings were gone. And to this day, no one has ever seen them again. And which of the two factions was right? As a matter of fact, neither, as the following fragments of narrative will go to prove. Once upon a time, so say the Zaparo Indians, who inhabit the district between the Amazon and the Marañon, there came across to Pampas de Sacramento a company of gold seekers, white men, who drove the natives from their workings and took possession of them. They were the first white men who had ever been seen there, and the Indians were afraid of their guns. But eventually, treachery did the work of courage, for pretending to be friendly, the natives sent their women among the strangers, and it taught them how to make tucupi out of the breadroot, but did not tell them how to distinguish between the ripe and unripe. So the wretched white men made tucupi out of the unripe fruit, which brings on fits like epilepsy, and when they were lying about the camp helpless, the Indians attacked and killed them all. All except 3. These 3 they gave to the vampire. But what was the vampire? The Zaparos did not know. Very long ago, said they, there were many vampires in Peru, but they were all swallowed up in the year of the great earthquake when the Andes were lifted up, and there was left behind only one Arinchi, who lived where the Amazon joins the Marañon, and he would not eat dead bodies, only live ones from which the blood would flow. So far the legend, and that it had some foundation in facts proved by the records of the district, which tell of more than one massacre of white gold seekers in the Marañon by Indians whom they attempted to oust from the washings. But of the Arinchi, the vampire, there is no official mention. Here, however, other local superstitions help us to the reading of the riddle of the man-lizard at the University of Berenwurst. When a sacrifice was made to the vampire, the victim was bound in a canoe and taken down the river to a point where there was a kind of winding backwater, which had shelving banks of slimy mud. And at the end there was a rock with a cave in it. And here the canoe was left. A very slow current flowed through the tortuous creek, and anything thrown into the water ultimately reached the cave. Some of the Indians had watched the canoes drifting along a few yards only in an hour, and turning round and round as they drifted, and had seen them reach the cave and disappear within. And it had been a wonder to them, generation after generation, that the cave was never filled up, for all day long the current was flowing into it, carrying with it the sluggish flotsam of the river. So they said the cave was the entrance to hell, and bottomless. And one day a white man, a professor of that same University of Berenwurst, and a mighty hunter of beetles before the Lord, lived with the Indians in friendship, went up the backwater, right up to the entrance, and set afloat inside the cave a little raft, heaped up with touchwood and knots of the oil tree, which he set fire to, and he saw the raft go creeping along, all ablaze, for an hour and more, lighting up the wet walls of the caves that went on either side. And then it was put out. It did not go out suddenly as if it had upset or floated over the edge of a waterfall, but just as if it had been beaten out. For the burning fragments were flung to one side and the other, and the pieces still alight glowed for a long time in the ledges and flints of rock where they fell. The cave was filled with the sound of a sudden wind, the echoes, the noise of great wings flapping. And at last, one day, the professor went to the cave himself. I took, he wrote, a large canoe, and from the bows I built up a brazier of stout cask hoops. Behind it set a gold washing tin tub for a reflector, and loaded the canoe with roots of the resin tree, and oil wood, and yams, and dried meat. And I took spears with me, one was tipped with a woorali poison, that numbs but does not kill. So I drifted inside the cave, and I lit my fire, and with my pole I guided the canoe very cautiously through the tunnel. And long before it widened out, and creeping along one wall, I suddenly became aware of a movement of something on the opposite side. So I turned the light fair upon it, and there, upon a kind of ledge, sat a beast with a head like a large gray dog. Its eyes were as large as a cow's. And what its shape was, I could not see. But as I looked, I began gradually to make out 2 huge bat-like wings, and these were spread to their utmost, as if the beast were on tiptoe and ready to fly. And so it was. For just as I had realized, I beheld before me some great bat reptile of a kind unknown to science, except as pre-diluvian, and the shock had thrilled through me the thought I was actually in the presence of a living specimen of the so-called extinct flying lizards of the flood. The thing launched itself upon the air, and the next instant it was upon me. Clutching onto the canoe, it beat its wings at the flame so furiously it was all I could do to keep the canoe from capsizing. Taken by surprise, I was nearly stunned by the strength and rapidity of his blows before I attempted to defend myself. By that time, scarcely half a minute had elapsed, the brazier had been nearly emptied by the powerful brute, and the vampire, mistaking me no doubt for a victim of sacrifice, had already taken hold of me. Next instant, I had driven a spear clean through its body, and with a prodigious tumult of wings the thing loosed its claws from my clothes and dropped into the stream. As quickly as possible I rekindled my light, and I saw the Arinchi, with wings outstretched upon the water, drifting down the current. I followed it. Hour after hour, my reflector turned full upon that gray dog's head with cow-like eyes. I passed down along the dark and silent waterway. I ate and drank as I went along, but did not dare fall asleep. A day must have passed, and 2 nights. And then, of course, as I had all along expected, I saw right ahead a pale, eye-shaped glimmer. I knew I was coming out into daylight again. The opening came nearer and nearer, and it was with intense eagerness I gazed upon my trophy, the floating Arinchi, the last of the winged reptiles. Already in imagination I saw myself the foremost of travellers in European fame, the hero of my day. What were Banks' kangaroos or Du Chaillu's gorilla to my discovery of the last survivor of the pterodactyls, of the creatures of flood, the flying saurian of the Cataspree-Noachian epoch of catastrophe and mud? All of these thoughts I had not noticed the vampire was no longer moving, and suddenly the bow of the canoe bumped against it. In an instant it climbed up on the boat. Its great bat-like wings once more beat me and scattered the flaming brands. The thing made a desperate attempt to get past me back into the gloom. It had seen the daylight approaching, and rather than face the sun, preferred to fight. Its ferocity was that of a maddened dog, but I kept it off with my pole, and seeing my opportunity as it clung, flapping its wings upon the bow, gave it such a thrust as made it drop off. It began to swim. I then for the first time noticed its long neck. With my pole I struck it on the head and stunned it, and once more saw it go drifting on the current into daylight. What a relief it was to be out in the open air! It was noon, and as we passed out from under the entrance of the cave. The river blazed so in the sunlight that after the 2 days of almost total darkness I was blinded for a time. I turned my canoe to the shore, to the shade of trees, and throwing a noose over the floating body, let it tow behind. Once more on firm land, in possession of the vampire! I dragged it out of the water. What a hideous beast it looked, this winged kangaroo with a python's neck! It was not dead, so I made a muzzle with a strip of skin, and then I firmly bound its wings together round its body. I lay down and slept. When I awoke, the next day was breaking, so, having breakfasted, I dragged my captive into the canoe and went on down the river. Where I was, I had no idea, but I knew I was going to the sea, going to Germany, and that was enough. For 2 months I had been drifting with the current down this never-ending river. My adventures of hostile natives, of rapids and alligators and jaguars, I need say nothing. They are the common property of all travelers. But my vampire! It is alive. Now I am devoured by only one ambition: to keep it alive. To let Europe actually gaze upon the living, breathing survivor of the great reptiles known to the human race before the days of Noah. A missing link between the reptile and the bird. To this end, I just deny myself food, deny myself even precious medicine. In spite of myself, I gave it all my quinine. When the miasma crept up the river at night, I covered it with my rug and lay exposed myself. I covered it with my... If the black fever should seize me. 3 months, and still upon this hateful river. Will it never end? I have been ill. So ill that for 2 days I could not feed it. I had not the strength to go alone to find food. I have not the strength to go ashore to find food. I fear that it will die before I can get it home. Been ill again. The black fever. But it is alive. I caught a vicuna swimming in the river, and it sucked it dry. Gallons of blood. It had been unfazed 3 days. In its hungry state it broke its muzzle. I was almost too feeble to put it on again. A horrible thought possesses me. Suppose it breaks its muzzle again when I am lying ill, delirious, and it is ravenous. Oh, the horror of it! To see eating is terrible. It links the claws of its wings together and cowers over the body. Its head is under the wings, out of sight. But the victim never moves. As soon as the vampire touches it, there seems to be paralysis. Once those wings are linked, there's absolute quiet, only the grating of teeth upon bone. Horrible, terrible! But in Germany I shall be famous. In Germany with my vampire. Am very am very feeble. It broke its muzzle again, but it was in the daylight, when it is blind. Its great eyes are blind in sunlight. It was a long struggle. This black fever, and the horror of this thing. I'm now too weak now to kill it if I would. I must get it home alive. Soon, surely soon, the river will end. Oh God, does it never reach the sea, reach white men, reach home? But if it attacks me, I will throttle it. If I am dying, I will throttle it. If we cannot go back to Germany alive, we will go together dead. I will throttle it with my two hands and fix my teeth in its horrible neck. Our bones may lie together on the bank of this accursed river. This is nearly all that was recovered in the professor's diary, but it is enough to tell us the final tragedy. The two skeletons were found together on the very edge of the river bank. Half of each, in a lapse of years, had been washed away with successive flood tides. The rest, when put together, made up the man-reptile that, to use a Rabelaisian phrase, metagrobolized all to nothing at the University of Beerenwort. Just as good as the last time I read it. The Arinci. Wait, I'm still fucking very interesting, like a retro pterosaur. It's kind of weird to think about how back in the day, like before they were discovered. Technically, they were discovered before dinosaurs, and back in the day, they were like the premier prehistoric reptile, alongside the ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. And of course, that long history means we've had a lot of very weird takes of it in fiction. Let's see. Now, what shall we do? What shall I read next? Yeah, it seems like there's only three people watching. So there's two people. Yes, two people besides you. If anyone's here in chat, just feel free to say hello. Oh, Anna just dropped it too. I'm just thinking this over about how I could do this better. My current sort of plan of attack is maybe doing this as on a voice chat, like setting up a Discord server for it, having like a group of people talking about it, and shares the burden a little bit, makes it easier to come up with things. Well, that's a funny thing to say. Yeah, exactly. Just have a bit more of a lively chat. You know me. I'm not a very charismatic person. Oh, we got third person again. Oh, and never mind. And it's gone. One more story, I think. Okay. Let's say is that might just be the people. Might just be that people aren't here. People aren't talking very much. 39. Slaying of the Plesiosaurus. It's one I don't remember too well. I want to save the monster of Lake Lametri, how batshit it is for later. Captain Charles Jack, Slaying of the Plesiosaurus, by Edwin J. Webster. Captain Charles Jackson stood before his tent and looked anxiously to the north, where far in the distance loomed up the forbidding slopes of the great Central African mountain range. It was now 4 days since Alaska, his head scout, had left camp but for an exploring tour of the mountains in that region at their base. Captain Jackson was in charge of one of the surveying parties sent north from the Transvaal to make an inspection of the possible routes of the Great Cape to Cairo Railway, which would bring together the northern and southern portions of England's African empire. Alaska was faithful, intelligent, and hunted over southern and central Africa for years. There were no hostile tribes in that region, and the captain was at a loss to explain the absence of his trusted scout. A man, weary and footsore, his clothes torn to rags, broke through the underbrush at the foot of the little hill in which the camp was located. Slowly, like the person who had run until exhausted, he climbed towards the camp. It was Laska. His rifle was gone, so was his revolver and cartridge belt. And even as he drew near the camp, he looked around like a man who has escaped some peril, and the memory of which still haunts him. His face was drawn and haggard, and the eyes of the bronzed old Arab was a timid, frightened look no one had ever seen there before. Dead, all dead, replied Laska, not sullenly, but in the tone of a man who has passed beyond caring. And when Captain Jackson asked him what had become of the rest of his party, a devil arose from the waters and seized them. It was kismet that I should not die then, so I live. But after what I have seen, I do not greatly care for life. Were they see Were they seized by some animal? Inquired the English captain in perplexed tones. He had known Laska for years, and not doubted his faithfulness. And he had seen the grim old Arab fighter face death unmoved many times, and could not understand what had fearfully shaken his iron nerves. It was no animal, my captain, replied Laska earnestly. I, who have fought and hunted over Africa for years, know all the animals, and there is none that can stand before the bullets of a Lee Metford. And it was in very truth a devil that seized them. I am not a man to be frightened at old wives' tales. I saw him with my own eyes and felt his burning breath. I will tell you the tale from the beginning. They may not think Laska, who has faced danger with you many times, was terrified by a vision in the night. With the 4 men you gave me, I traveled north till we came to the foot of the mountains. We were well armed, the natives were friendly, and we had thought of no peril. As we went up the mountains, I noticed we met few natives, but I gave the matter little thought. The peak to the north is said to have once been a volcano, though that was so long ago that scarcely the tradition of it is left. Where it once poured out fire, there is now a lake. Now the thought in my mind was that we should explore this lake, for perhaps the water might be of use when the steel road is laid. When I tried to get a guide, every native was unwilling to go with me. They all said the lake had no bottom, but connected with hell, and that the devil came up through the water and seized all, man or beast, who ventured near it. At last, by offering a high price, I persuaded the natives to leave me in the side of the lake. When I saw it, I laughed at his fears, for the lake is like a jewel set in the top of the mountain. All around it are high cliffs with palm trees, and it is beautiful to look upon. At one point there is an opening through the cliffs and a steep roadway down to the lake itself. The native, though in fear, brought us to the top of the roadway. Then he refused to go in any further, even when I offered him more pay. I was angry, and drawing my revolver, told him that if he did not guide us down the lake, I would shoot him. But even then, though clearly in terror of my revolver, he refused to lead us down the roadway. Better to die by the little gun, he answered me, than to be seized by the devil, and seized by the devil and living dragged down through the waters to hell. I saw that neither death, threats, nor bribes would persuade. I let him stay. And accompanied by the men he sent out with me, I started down the roadway toward the lake. For I thought the natives had been frightened by a hippopotamus, or a very big crocodile, or some other animal living in the lake. Having our rifles, I felt little fear. The pathway was smooth, as if it had been traveled over by some big snake. This I wondered at, but being a fool I thought myself wise, and I knew of all the animals in Africa and feared none. The water of the lake is not blue, but green like the ocean. After I had explored the sides, I thought it might be useful to know the depth, so we built a raft and paddled out on the water. The captain remembers that he gave me 3 sounding lines before I started. I tied a heavy stone to one of the lines to let it down, but it did not touch bottom. I tied the second line to the first, but that it did not touch. Then I fastened the third line, but still the stone sank down the length of the 3 lines, nearly 2 miles. So I gave the order to haul up the line. My men were busy drawing up, and I was idly watching the lake, when I saw something dark coming up through the deep water. It is the big crocodile that the natives think is the devil, I said to my friend. I will show him what a rifle can do. As I prepared my gun, the thing drew near, and through the clear water of the lake I could see that it was no crocodile. I called to my men to drop the line and get their rifles ready. Even then, I thought it was only a water serpent that had grown to unusual size. But before I could get a clear view of the creature, so swiftly was it swimming toward the top, there was a little uprising near the water, a little uprising in the water at the side of the raft, and the thing broke through to the surface. And then I knew the natives had not lied, and that there was a devil in the lake. First came up the head, larger by far than that of any elephant, with grinning jaws and big teeth. Then came the neck, like that of a snake, but rising fully 40 feet from the body. The body resembled a huge turtle, but larger than 6 hippopotami together. It had fins and a long, heavy tail that lashed the water to foam. From the from the from the grinning jaws to the tail, it must have been nearly 100 feet, though it seemed much farther. The lake devil lifted his head far in the air above us and opened his jaws. A tall man would have stood upright above us. He could have stood upright in them, and his head would have scarcely reached the upper jaw. As he saw this head above us, all thought we were dead. My men fired wildly and leapt into the lake. But I thought, devil or not, I would hit him with at least one bullet. Taking aim at the waving neck, I fired. The bullet was from a Lee Metford and struck him fairly in the neck, but made no more impression than a pebble thrown by a child. I just need water. The lake devil struck downward with his head, and the heavy logs of the raft were splintered as if they had been rotten twigs. Each man swam toward the shore as quickly as possible. I had dived deep and swam under water when I left the raft. I rose to the surface, I heard a scream, and saw one of my men snatched up in the lake devil's jaws and hurled into the air. Then I swam faster, not looking back, and 3 times more I heard a scream, and I knew that all my men were dead. But I did not look around till my feet touched the bottom. Then I saw that the lake devil was swimming after me. His swimming was as the rush of one of the steamers that travel over the great water. I ran through the shallow water and up the steep bank, but the lake devil swam faster and reached the shore and chased after me. I heard the hissing of his breath and felt the wind of it on my cheek. As I ran, I drew my revolver and fired backwards as swiftly as I could pull the trigger, without looking around or ceasing to run. Perhaps one of my shots hit him in the eye, or he might have wished to return to the lake and devour the bodies of my comrades. Whatever the reason, he stopped his pursuit. But I ran on and on without stopping. Up the steep bank and through the forest and down the side of the mountain, where I had seen the lake devil, and I, Laska, who had faced death many times, was afraid so that I trembled like a scared child. My bones seemed to melt within me. And I ran on until darkness came, and I fell to the ground and slept. For I had no fear of wild animals, since I had seen the devil and still lived. Laska drew a long breath and seated himself wearily on the ground. Captain Jackson was greatly puzzled over the matter. Had it been any other of the men in the camp, he would have been inclined to laugh at the tale. But Laska, the fierce old Arab, when all his life had seen battle and countless death in all the various forms they are to be met with in Central Africa, must have been some real and terrible danger so utterly to unman him. Captain Jackson's sporting blood was aroused, and he determined to follow up the adventure. "Well, Laska," he replied, "there's only one thing to do, and that is to find out more about this creature you call a lake devil. Though what kind of animal he may be, I can't imagine from your description." "I know of every kind of animal in Africa," said Laska decidedly. "He is no animal, but a devil that came up from the center of the earth. Bullets will not pierce his skin, and it is death to go on the lake. Even a devil cannot fight against fate, and it was not kismet that I should die. But to go on the lake a second time would be to laugh at fate, which none can do and live." "Devil or not," answered Jackson, "we'll organize a hunting party and find out about your monster. His skin may be too thick for bullets, but if he's flesh and blood, dynamite will get him." Being a British man, of course, he needs to murder this one miracle of nature. And it killed 4 people in seconds, but they weren't really people. They weren't white enough. The next day, the hunting party started out. Despite the protests of Laska, who had no wish for a second interview with the devil. Through the tangled jungle, they made their way until they reached the foot of the mountains. Night overtook them before they got more than halfway up to the side. The tents were pitched, and the following day the start was made at dawn. It was nearly noon when they reached the top. High cliffs fringed the little lake, which lay spread out before them, deep, placid, without suggestion of danger. The party halted to view the lake and decided which was the best way to make the descent to its level. "There is the path which we descended," said Laska, pointing to the east where a smooth roadway seems to run down to the lake. "But there is still time to turn back and not tempt fate by hunting lake devils." The forest for miles around was deserted, for the natives shunned the top of the mountain as an accursed place. Even wild animals seemed less common than other parts of that region. The only living thing in sight was a big bull elephant that could be seen making his way down the road towards the lake. That elephant must be a rogue who has wandered here from some faraway place," observed Laska. "The natives told me that none of the animals living here would have water at the Devil's Lake." The big elephant marched down to the lake, waded out until the water was up to his body, and began drinking. When he had drank his fill, he commenced to wash, spraying himself all over with big streams from his trunk. "That old fellow seems to enjoy himself jolly well without any thought of danger from devils," said Captain Jackson. Out in the middle of the lake appeared a little eddy. Laska pointed it, and no saw it first, and silently pointed it out to the English captain. Nearer and nearer to the shore came the eddy, but still the big bull elephant stood spraying himself, unconscious of all danger. And dimly through the clear lake, Captain Jackson could make out some huge creature rushing towards the lake. A flurry of waves, and with a splash and road, a gigantic creature head broke through the water. With a splash and road, a gigantic head broke through the wall. I guess roar probably was a type of. It was followed. It was followed by a snaky, twisting neck, nearly 40 feet long. Then came the body like that of a turtle, but far larger than that of any turtle since the age of geological monsters, beside whom the largest animals of today are small, ruled land and sea. Too late the big elephant saw his terrible peril and tried to rush toward the shore. The snaky head shot out, the big jaws opened, and then closed with a snap, grasping the elephant about his body as a cat snatches a mouse. Over and over in the water, kicking with his feet, striking with his trunk, and trying in vain to thrust with his tusks. The elephant rolled. No creature in the African jungle could have matched him in strength. Against the survival of a past age, even the elephant was helpless. Nearer and nearer inshore came the lake devil, clutching the big elephant in his unbreakable grip. The water was churned to foam by the desperate efforts of the elephant to free himself, but still the lake devil pushed forward until all his body was resting on the bottom. The elephant had also succeeded in getting all 4 feet firmly planted on solid ground, and threw all his strength into one supreme effort to get away. Failing at this, he twisted his body around and began striking fierce, lashing blows with his trunk at the head of the monster. Then the lake devil exerted his tremendous strength. The snaky neck and huge head swung around, the elephant being lifted clear off his feet. For a second, the air vibrated with the shrill, agonized trumpetings of the elephant. Then Lake Devil gave a little push with his fins, and his body moved toward the deeper water. The big head sank under, carrying the shrieking elephant with it. Another instant, another instant, and with a rush like the launching of a battleship, the Lake Devil shot out toward the middle of the lake and sank down into its unfathomable depths. Jesus Christ. So this thing just grabbed a full-grown bull elephant, hauled it up into the air, and fucking slam dunked it into the water like a leopard seal with a penguin. I wouldn't be surprised if that elephant exploded on impact with the water. "It is death to go out on the lake," said Laska sullenly, Our bullets will not hurt him. Why throw our lives away? When even the big rogue elephant was helpless, what can men do against the lake devil? It would be suicide to go back on the lake, answered Captain Jackson decidedly. That fellow could sink anything smaller than an ocean liner. Our only hope would be to get him to attack us on land, and we can try our bullets on him. If they don't work, we can use the dynamite. We won't try that until it's a case of life or death, for we'll blow him to pieces and destroy the skeleton. The little party moved slowly around the side of the lake to the pathway between the cliffs. Even Captain Jackson felt nervous as they approached the lake, the lair of the great plesiosaurus, the prehistoric monster before whose might the strongest and fiercest of modern animals will be helpless. Laska glanced apprehensively at the smooth sides of the roadway. They've been worn smooth by the journeyings of the lake devil, he murmured. The guide said that although he's clumsy on land, he can outstrip the swiftest runner. Captain Jackson halted his men about 100 yards from the shore of the lake. There's no use in getting any nearer. I wish he was hungry, so we could decoy him to the shore. The lake devil is always hungry and always angry, said Alaska decidedly. We have only disturbed the water in some manner and he will show himself. Then may Allah protect us. The captain ordered his men to get their rifles in readiness for instant use. Then he unstrapped a little bag, threw out 3 dynamite cartridges. One of these he handed to Alaska, another he slipped into his own pocket. These 2 will explode if we throw them, he said. But we don't want to do that until it is absolutely necessary. I'll fix a fuse on the 3rd one, throw it out into the lake. The explosion will probably disturb His Majesty, and we'll come to the surface to see what is the matter. Then we can use our rifles. If he makes a rush at us on land, we'll have a good target. And finally, if the bullets seem to have any effect, we can try the dynamite. That probably will be too much even for a plesiosaurus. He adjusted the fuse to the dynamite cartridge. Walking to the shore, lighted it and threw the cartridge far out into the lake. The explosion came just as the cartridge reached the surface and sent up a big column of water. Then he ran back to where his men were standing. All seized their rifles and stood anxiously, watching the lake for indications of the appearance of the plesiosaurus. For a moment there was nothing but the waves tossed up by the dynamite to show that anything unusual had taken place. Suddenly a big head and huge, snaky neck broke through the water. The plesiosaurus had risen to see who had dared disturb his domain. The head waved back and forth uncertainly. Then he saw the intruders and began to swim at a terrific speed toward the shore. Here he comes, said Captain Jackson grimly. Cool as a word now. Try and hit him in the eyes. The Lee Metfords began to talk, and the bullets splashed the water all around the swiftly advancing head. Some of them may have struck, but the monster only came at greater speed. In a seemingly incalculably short time, he had reached the shallow water. The long, snaky neck appeared in plain sight, and the huge, turtle-like body, black, slimy, and threatening. Over the shallows the monster scrambled, the fins carrying him forward swifter than a man could run. Inured to danger as all the party were, they could feel their hearts throbbing inside the antediluvian monster, 90 feet long with jaws that could crush a dozen men. The plesiosaurus was plainly enraged by the bullets which kept pattering harmlessly against his thick hide. His red, bloodshot eyes glared, the slime dropping from his lips, and he seemed rather some monster that had come up from the depths of hell than anything creature of flesh and blood. Now he had gained the land and was still hurrying on. Steady, steady, said Captain Jackson. Aim at his eyes. A bullet smashed into one of the glaring eyes, making a splash as if it had struck a pool of blood. The plesiosaurus only seemed to increase its speed. It was now near enough they could see the dark blood oozing from bullet wounds in neck and body. They appeared in pinpricks and only angered him the more. Now he was 80, now he was 60 yards from the little group. Laska stooped and picked up his dynamite cartridge. Wait a second longer, gasped Captain Jackson. I don't want to destroy the body. As the plesiosaurus still rushed forward, Laska could not restrain himself. Throw now, he exclaimed. Throw now, or we are dead. Captain Jackson drew out his cartridge. It was time, for the wavering, snaky head, 40 feet from the ground, would in an instant more be lowered for a deadly, sweeping clutch. Drop on your faces when I throw! shouted the English captain, and he hurled the dead dynamite cartridge straight toward the plesiosaurus. Alaska had already thrown his, and both Captain Jackson and Alaska dropped on the ground. Two terrible explosions, so near together they seemed one, and the air was full of pieces of flesh and bone and blood. Alaska's cartridge had fallen a little short, but even as it touched the ground, the plesiosaur had dropped his head as if to grasp the deadly missile. Captain Jackson's cartridge had struck directly in front of the big, turtle-like body. Except for the blood bespattered over ground and the fragments of flesh and bones, it was hard to believe that the strongest and most terrible monster on Earth had a second before been advancing its deadly charge. Against dynamite, even the champion of antediluvian ages had been helpless. It was dynamite or death, said Captain Jackson mournfully, but it was too bad we had to use it. His body would have been worth a fortune. Alaska shook his head decidedly. Twice I have looked the lake devil in the face, and Allah has preserved me, said the old Arab. I am glad it is no longer possible to see him. The sight is not a nice one, nor the memory of it pleasant to a man who has lived long, committed many sins, and knows that the time is not far distant when Azrael, the angel of death, will call him to account. And that was the slaying of the plesiosaurus. Pretty good build-up, but again, kind of just Deus Ex Machina at the end. Then again, it's kind of to be expected of a story like this. Okay, we've been going for an hour and a half now. I also think it was alright for a first stream. Yeah, it still seems like I got a long way to go for, people care. That's how it is. Thank you all for coming, and have a good night.